The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my real top niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day peppering America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclose of it, close out the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit, bitch, if not, better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas and get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money bunch of great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya, I own every gold mine in South Africa, thanks baby, you made me $1 billion, plus I own a building, for each one of my children's children.
Welcome everybody to Voice of Rebellion Radio. This is Chris J, your host, this morning, speaking to you from St. Petersburg, Florida, where we will be having guest Kotetova Svetlana here in a matter of about 2 minutes. I'm going to give her a number to call, and we'll be able to bring her in, so everybody remain patient. This has been a bit of experience to try to get her all the way from eastern Ukraine onto our show. By the way, the situation in Ukraine has been a very volatile situation for about 3 years. In the Donbass region, we have the separatists fighting against the fascist regime in Kiev that has subjected the people of eastern Ukraine just based on their ethnicity and based on their based on the language that they speak, Russian, is that these people are being subjected to horrific acts of violence like what we had 2 years ago with the Odessa massacre, 3 years ago now, on May 2nd, 2014, when pregnant women were even killed in this horrific massacre by right-wing thugs that were loyal to the Ukrainian government, as they have the unofficial military wing and the official military wing are both committing atrocities, whether it's right sector or people of the Azov battalion, or is it whether the official Ukrainian military themselves, they're all responsible. In all situations, we have massive war crimes being committed by the government of the Ukraine. And, you know, in the Donbass region, these people, many of them being ethnically Russian, have many of the people being ethnic Russian inside the eastern Ukraine have been subjected to this, and this government in Kiev has told the people of eastern Ukraine that they don't deserve sovereignty, they don't deserve independence, but at the same time, they're treating them not like people, their own people. They're telling them that they are Ukrainians, but they don't treat them as Ukrainians. They treat them as foreigners living in a country that they occupy. It's an occupation. Is what they're committing in Donetsk, what they're committing in Lugansk, and other places. And inside of and in other countries, in other parts of the Donbass region. Right now, you have the two different republics, Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republic. There was a loose confederation at one point as the Novorossiya Confederation, but however, that's since fallen apart in favor of now there's more like just the two separate republics or whatnot. You have Lugansk and Donetsk Republic. And these two countries, they're seeking recognition. The recognition seems to be pretty limited between countries like that they get some of the other breakaway republics in the Eastern Europe. You have like countries like South Ossetia or South Ossetia. These were countries that broke away from Georgia, and the loon that was Saakashvili, who was the former president of Georgia. Now he's in the Ukrainian government, not surprisingly. Also, there's I think they might recognize the breakaway Republic of Transnistria, which broke away from Moldova, which I'm pretty sure is a pretty strong NATO ally, the small Eastern European country. And there's a few others, in the area. There's also like the ex-Soviet Republic, Azerbaijan. They have Nagorno-Karabakh, however you pronounce it, is split away from the rest of the country. And I know Azerbaijan is backed by Turkey, while I believe the breakaway republic is backed by Russia. And I think that a lot of the ex-Soviet republics, the West has been able to get to these governments and turn these leaders similar to what they did in South America, and make these brutal leaders that would follow blindly in the footsteps of the United States, and they act like dictators, but they defend them in the media, they defend them in other ways, trying to say that these are legitimate leaders and that these people are democratic and are not brutal in nature. By the way, we're just waiting on the call from our guest at the moment. So everyone just hang in there. By the way, our guest name is Kochetkova Svetlana, I believe is how we pronounce her name. But, of course, when sometimes these names, I just let the guests themselves pronounce it. I may ask if they use a shorter version of the name. I think I have it right. You do read Cyrillic at a basic level, and I can usually get names right, and I can see, some familiar names like Svetlana is pretty familiar. It's a pretty commonly used name over there. Ukraine in Eastern Europe, we've been watching, all of us over here, we've been watching what's been going on. And this is not something that we like to see. This is a very unfortunate scenario. And you have the government going in Ukraine as far enough to using a false flag attack to try to draw in NATO. What the evidence points to, what happened at MH17, that they tried to blame on the East Ukrainian rebels, despite the very little amount of evidence to indicate so. But there was a lot of evidence that was definitely showing towards that the West Ukrainians using May fighter jets were able to take down MH17, killing, I think, 296 passengers. And it was actually the second Malaysian Airlines taken down that year. Another one was MH370, though people say that disappeared. I think that there was foreign involvement possibly that the MH370 ended up at Diego Garcia as a retaliation for the Malaysian government rapprochement with BRICS and sorry, I'm trying just to establish connection between me and my guest right now. It's kind of hard because of the distance to actually seem to get this call going or whatnot. And, one thing that is, all the Blog Talk Radio users or whatever, that I haven't used Blog Talk Radio in a while, so today was the first time in a long time using it, is that I found out that the Skype feature is not available to phones, which is really inconvenient because it doesn't allow you to. It doesn't allow you to, bring in a lot of people. It's like you have to have a direct phone number appears, and a lot of people don't have the feature where they can call on Skype to a phone number here in the United States, which that's what Blog Talk Radio number puts you to. And then there's like all these other changes. I used to the old guest call-in number that we used to have, and now we have a different guest call-in number. We have it changed recently. I prepaid for the premium service again. So that way I could do shows here at the a Blog Talk Radio, record them in advance or whatever when I had guests that couldn't make it on that time zone or whatnot. But that's not the case anymore. Is that is that they changed our phone number and everything, and it was a mess. But hopefully we'll be able to establish connection soon between me and my guest. Otherwise, thinking this is could be pretty hard to ever do that. Can't do it this way. I've had guests from overseas before on here, but I think it's because they had the paid version of Skype or whatever where you can make the phone calls. And I do apologize that this about the guests or whatnot. I know this has happened before. It's like a lot of times we'll see shows from overseas. They get real tricky in doing so. Last time it was always like power failure and a lot of other things were in play over there in Serbia. I tried to bring guests from Serbia onto the show. This time even further from eastern Ukraine. And it does not really appear that things are cooperating too well. But hopefully they'll be able to, hopefully that will change soon. And there we go, we got on speakerphone. I'll make it a little bit easier for me. But, anyways, what else has been going on in the news is that apparently there's been a troop buildup. I know this is pretty unrelated, but a lot of times when we talk about Ukraine, the proxy wars that are leading up to possibly a bigger buildup towards a much bigger war. And, one of these proxy wars, Syria, apparently there's been armored vehicles that have been heading towards the Syrian border. The United States is doing a massive military buildup into the Syrian border. And I think that soon there could be potentially some major ground invasion of some kind. And, Trump's master plan, was talk about possibly using the ground troops against the Syrian government. And I think right now that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the potential, we're seeing the escalation at the moment towards that. Syrian, we saw with the strikes earlier this month, almost going into next month. We're almost into May now, so that's what I was saying. The strikes that happened at the airfield, the other tensions have been multiple Israeli strikes that have happened across the month, including what appeared to have been one at an airport, Damascus International Airport. Earlier this week, there was a big strike. So the Israelis seem to be doing occasional strikes now, and it's not like they're letting off on the strikes. They're continuing to do strikes illegally against the Syrian Arab Army, and now the United States is starting to get involved in the strikes. They did one strike against the Syrian Arab Army. Now we might be seeing more under the Trump administration. Potentially, who knows, we might be seeing a big ground movement soon within the next few weeks, who knows, next few months possibly. I really do expect that the United States will be entering Syria within the next 6 months or so. And I expect, though, before we enter Syria, there potentially be a massive false flag that could be happening. Some people say that big false flag has already happened, which was this text, but I don't believe that gets the American people riled up enough. So what they're going to do is they're going to do something that's more closer to home, similar to when they were used this false flag in order to rally the people into war against anti-Semitic using another false flag. And, this is not just a speculation, because, you had Netanyahu 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 4 years ago now, saying that in 3 to 4 years New York's going to be attacked. And, he didn't, it was kind of a vague way he said it, kind of like saying that he knew it was going to happen. How would he know that New York's going to be attacked unless he has foreknowledge of it? Just like how they had foreknowledge of September 11th or foreknowledge of the Gulf of Tonkin. They're planning these things. And planning the attacks on the they did the attack on the Valley, the jingoist picture in some Americans, and some Americans were falsehood after September 11th, and there was big protests or whatnot. But then we shoot after, and it was weird that there's a lot of some Americans, because the two-party paradigm, they when it was attacked by the Obama administration, they didn't go out and protest or anything about the Gaddafi's removal, but they protested about Saddam's removal or the Iraqi war. And it's when it comes to Saddam Hussein, I feel like it's kind of a parable by Bashar Assad, because Saddam Hussein, yes, was a brutal tyrant, but the way that he was taken out killed about 38 million people. It was not a good thing. Assad would be the destruction of a very prosperous unit, final destruction of a very prosperous area of Syria's history prior to the war. When the war happened, you had the destruction of the people now. But before, Syria was a modern country and was moving towards a more democratic society. While it went more of a one-man rule in the past, maybe even, it was quite autocratic under the Assad regime. I think Bashar was working towards a democratic system that is really democracy, the way that the West does is really the best system, is what comes to mind. In my opinion, there's definitely, our democracy is not a democracy. It's an oligarchy, and it's not even it's not even a real it's not a real system, and people don't really vote in the our system. You have the electoral college that makes the votes, and we just suggestions. They even admit to that, and they only have two candidates belong to the same party, which is Wall Street, the Wall Street Party. That's what they should call the Democrat Republican parties. The two factions of the same party, but they're not even really that different at all. Just that these two parties are similar in nature. So these two parties are sorry about that. It told me like I went offline for a second, but I was apparently still online the whole time. No, it's that they're Democratic and Republican parties are two the same. They're obviously both doesn't matter. They're both stand for the same thing. And it seems like it got more obvious over time. The 2016 election that really exemplified that. Is that we have ultimately the two banker parties, and it didn't look at the same people that fund the wars that are going on in Syria, the wars that are going on in Ukraine. Who's funding the Western Ukraine government? And it's actually pretty ironic, it's that this neo-Nazi party that pretty much taken over the West Ukrainian government is being funded by their may least likely backer. You would not think that the Israeli government would be backing Kiev, but they're actually the second biggest backer financially behind the United States. It's the Israeli government. And it said that even some of the weaponry is Israeli, that the Western Ukrainians have received. Of course, the West Ukrainian government has received like $1 billion almost as soon as it happened from Kerry and the Obama administration, and they're continuing to still appear to remain, despite all the talk to the contrary by Trump, taking a much more friendly stance to the West Ukrainian government than they were talking before, is that they might be able to reconcile with Russia, and that may potentially that the United States would abandon support for the fascist regime in Kiev, but it does not appear so. It appears that this will continue, and the war's actually heated back up again. And I think with Donald Trump in presidency is that, one of the biggest ruses ever was pulled off in American political history, and one of the biggest ruses ever in American and just in the world history is the made essentially the Donald Trump effect, is that people thought that Donald Trump was an anti-establishment outsider looking to completely change the dynamics of American politics or whatever. And some people went as far as to say that this man was going to fight against the New World Order and maybe a new John F. Kennedy. Then he gets into the presidency and falls into the footsteps of all the neocons, of all the bullshit that his predecessors and that the establishment puts out. When it comes to Donald Trump, when it comes to the, also you see that they talk about draining the swamp, is that he refilled the swamp with more establishment of characters, and you had people, it's like the definition of establishment. Rex Tillerson, that people said was anti-establishment. Rex Tillerson demands, the same thing with Donald Trump. You really think about it, both characterizing either as anti-establishment was a huge argument about the Republicans when he said during one of the debates on the stage that he had financed pretty much everyone that was up there, is that he had financed politicians with seemingly different backgrounds. As he was one of the billionaires pulling the strings, he was one of the people that made the system corrupt. So it's like, why vote for the one that didn't lobby when you can vote for the puppet masters himself, one of the puppet masters? Even though he's a low-level puppet master, Donald Trump is still one of the billionaire elite that has more influence than your actual politicians. They're just talking heads to these billionaire elites, and the people above him, like the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, and all that, and whatnot. To everyone that's listening, we do apologize for the delay of getting our guests on the air. Hopefully, that's the thing, is that when sometimes getting these guests from long ways away or whatnot, we do have a lot of technical difficulties, and there's a lot of variables to play. And the people that are thinking about this is me saying, I'm on Blog Talk Radio right now, Aaron, thinking, if you are thinking about paying, especially if you think you're paying for the premium plan or whatnot for Blog Talk Radio, do not buy it. It is not worth it. I'm paying only $40 a month or whatever for this one, and I don't think this thing's worth $40 a month when there's all these other much cheaper streaming services, and also, of course, the people on UCY or whatnot that have that get the privilege of using the studio for free. That's how lucky you are to have privilege, because not every, a lot of people got to pay services like Blog Talk or whatnot in order to do so. But yeah, we're gonna be airing for about an hour and a half more. For people listening, it's probably about 9:30 right now Eastern time on the replay later on wherever you're listening from, UCY, or if you're also listening on the later replay, which would be on YouTube or whatnot when you check out the video. And there's also Real Liberty Media, I believe, still plays their shows, and the other platforms to listen to our show. About 30 minutes in, so we're just going to, we're talking about generally what's going on, current events and stuff like that. The French election that happened last week, and that's what we're talking about, is Macron versus Le Pen. Le Pen, is seen as the anti-establishment outsider, and opposes what appears to be, opposes globalism, the euro, and many other what seems to be plots and plans by the by the elite in order to, steps towards the New World Order, which is, European Union and all these trade organizations. I believe she is not too favorable to them. And Le Pen's also does not seem to be too favorable of the wars in Syria and Iran. She seems to be actually a candidate. Maybe, what she is saying is not the usual globalist and globalist garbage that we have of so many Western politicians and throughout election cycles. That we have all these politicians saying, even with Trump, that there was massive red flags of this campaign, like when he talked about the plans with Syria, or he talked about how he's going to make friends with Russia, but yet agitate all of Russia's allies, and how he was going to make a very strong stance against Iran. There's also how willing he was to dedicate himself to Israel. And now you see all the neocon promises that he made about, being tough on Iran and the being strong with Israel. That's all came to fruition. But when it comes to his supposed reconciliation with Russia and also a legitimate fight against terror in Syria, those have not happened, and it's continued the policies of the previous administration. And also we've seen an extreme buildup on the tensions against North Korea, and now the tensions in North Korea are made more tense than they were 4 years ago when we had the big crisis in 2013, where tensions got to the point where the North Korea was saying that the moment of explosion is any minute now. We're about that same level of tension again, and it would not surprise me if Donald Trump had his plans, or the people behind Donald Trump had in their plans a surgical strike against North Korea. And a little background on North Korea, that North Korea is often presented to you by the Western media as a backwards, gray communist state that where there's no freedom of expression. There's people that speak out against the government there in any way are thrown in jail or whatnot. But let's remember is that this is the same media that sold you the lies against Gaddafi. We know that Gaddafi was not the dictator that he was presented out to be on the media. They present you the lies of the Iranian government. The Iranian government that they try to seem like that there is no political debate there. They're having an election right now with multiple different candidates with quite different views. It goes to the comment that I saw on Press TV that was saying, somebody said, when's the last time you see a political debate in Saudi Arabia, one of America's values? They always talk about freedom of expression and freedom of assembly or whatnot, but these said these are not allowed. If you were to talk out against the monarchy in Saudi Arabia, you'd be locked up most likely. Iran, they have people, the reformists, the conservatives, and it's also funny that they it's kind of weird. I guess that they didn't allow Mahmoud Ahmadinejad to run again, which I think in a way the West doesn't have that. They use that against him because people in the West see Mahmoud Ahmadinejad as kind of nutty, and they see him as unorthodox. So I don't think that. I think in a way it was a part of it is for the country they're trying to protect. But going back to North Korea, is that North Korea, is now in the third generation of the Kim family's leadership. It was Kim Il-sung led from 1948 to 1994. Kim Il-sung led from Kim Jong-il led from 1994 to his death in 2011. And 2011, since Kim Jong-un, the grandson of the original Kim Il-sung, is the leader. Kim Jong-un is, I believe, if not the world's youngest head of state, was the world's youngest head of state. In North Korea, they have, at least in Pyongyang, it appears they have modern facilities of hospitals and all these other things that try to make it seem like North Korea does not have. North Korea has working universities. They have also a few different parties that participate in their parliament. They're all part of one political front, but however, they have the Korean Workers' Party, they have the Korean Social Democratic Party, and they have the Chosun Party. They have a few different parties. There are three different parties that participate in their parliament. And also, one of the biggest lies about North Korea, it's a gigantic lie, I would say, is the idea that anyone of any religion was heavily suppressed and that there's no open religious practices being allowed. I say that's a big lie because one of the North Korean vice presidents actually was a Presbyterian, I believe, and I believe Kim Il-sung also grew up as a Presbyterian. In fact, the North Korean government has a Christian there's definitely a Christian tolerance there, and there's actually been a Christian as the vice president prior, and also, I think the biggest religion in North Korea actually is Christianity is a pretty small religion, but they did recently open a Orthodox church, I believe, in Pyongyang. I think the biggest religion, one of the bigger religions there is shamanism. It's like the Korean original spirituality that they practiced from thousands of years ago. There's still some followers in North Korea. South Korea is like about half Catholic. A lot of the GIs brought Catholicism to the country. But of course, I would say that that's unfortunate that the Catholic Church was brought about, in the ruins of what was left of post-war Korea, is that the Catholic Church was able to take advantage and probably gain some more followers. And the Catholic Church, in my opinion, is an organization that has they're involved with Western political aims in recent years. Also, all the other internal corruption inside the bank that they have. The fact that they've possibly been arming a weapons company in the past. They were involved with the Nazis during World War II, and all the other well-known nasty stuff that goes on inside the Catholic Church at the higher levels of the Catholic Church. That is not a good thing. That the Catholicism was brought to South Korea after the war, and what it also has been done in South Korea is that they've lost a lot of their identity. That's one thing that people can't argue with North Korea, is that they still seem to have a lot of their original Korean identity, while South Korea has been sucked into the modernistic Japanese style of Asian culture, which, with the anime, with the with all these different weird fads and stuff like that. But when it comes to how far removed they are from the actual traditional Asian culture, it seems to be very far. While North Korea seems to be a little bit closer. And also another thing to be remembered is that people say that the characteristics of the current North Korean government, that it seems to be a very isolated and very distant from the world type government. The idea of that is not really it's not just a characteristic of the current government by Kim Jong-un. It's a characteristic really of Korean governments of the past, I think. That you had the Hermit Kingdom. North Korea's government that they have now is not the first one in Korea to be called the Hermit Kingdom. In fact, the Korean Empire used to be called the Hermit Kingdom way back in the day. And now say so many other, South Korea might be seen as a more cosmopolitan, more open government, and they seem to be willing to talk to more people. But it's also another thing is that they ultimately seem to be getting sucked into the Chinese circle. Is that they're going to be soon more heavily reliant on Chinese trade, and it's going to be interesting to watch actually what's going to happen. Because if South Korea get involved in the Chinese trade, I wonder if that will cause any problem between them and their relationship with the United States, or will the United States learn to deal with it? That's a very interesting question. But the South Korean government, right now, with the political crisis they've had, and of their the youth that was the daughter of the dictator Park Chung-hee, I believe is his name, who in killing an entire village at one time, bringing in the military to squash dissidents at one point. And Park Chung-hee was made the most brutal leader ever to be on the Korean Peninsula. His daughter became the president, but was engulfed with a corruption scandal, and it was now forced to resign. I think she got impeached, actually. And now they're awaiting a new election, and apparently supposed to be a very interesting election. I believe one of the candidates is kind of, his run is being characterized as almost like a Korean Donald Trump or something like that. I guess they're saying by his unorthodox style of campaigning, and it's no longer politics as usual, I guess, is what's being said maybe about the next South Korean election. And I think there's a lot around the world is that politics of usual are out the window. It's a whole different ballgame at this point. And all around the world, Iran also, we are dealing with over there. They have an election that's going on, and they have possibly, what shake up things is that the Mayor Tehran, who I think in some ways kind of resembles his Orthodox government, would probably be similar to Mayan Shaman and whatnot. If you have to win the election against Rouhani, then definitely can expect Iran to take a more hardline stance against the United States. Rouhani has taken more of a stance of, that's why he accepted our Iran deal of the West. I think that some of the people in the, some of the other candidates or whatnot, they're not afraid. They feel like that those needs to be stood up to, that the United States needs to be stood up to, because the United States, the United States is not really a country that can be reasoned with. The United States is not really a country that can be it's not really a country, because its government's controlled by the corporate and banker elite. The United States is not a country that these countries can work towards some kind of partnership alliance with. And I think that ultimately at this point, that most of these, countries like the United States or Israel, at this point, and even trying to try to live in peace with them, but rather just build up for the point where then they eventually try to do some kind of regime change, like what North Korea at this point has accepted. Is that there's nothing that the North Korean government can sign, there's nothing the North Korean government can do in order to ever live in peace with the United States and live in peace with the other adversaries of the country. But there's things they can build up and make a big enough deterrent that the United States will never touch North Korea. Maybe it's already at that point. I think they keep talking about how they're getting near the point of long-range missiles or whatever. I think the nuclear deterrent is what was enough. I don't think that at this point they really need to do anything more, because North Korea only can launch this thing, a few 100 miles or something like that. It still hit something in South Korea, and the United States really will have that kind of political blowback, even though that they know the North Koreans probably will never do it. The North Koreans is just that tough chance is not they're willing to risk. It's not really that they care about the people involved, that the United States really cares many civilians that be caught in whatever attack, or maybe might even be too many civilians if it was made directed at a large military base or what. Still, it's the political blowback that we're worried about. The United States seen allowing North Korea to having done such an action or whatever, the United States will not be trusted amongst people of South Korea and people in Asia in general, Japan, other allied countries in Asia, there's Thailand. There's a few different, there's a few pretty strong American allies in Asia, and also I think at the same time, America's plan is to, when I talk about America, D.C., Washington, D.C., the United States government's plans in Asia is to split away, is either to divide up and to kind of isolate China or maybe potentially partner with China in one way or another, and then try to use China's influence against Russia, make a United States-China alliance against Russia. It's kind of odd is that during the campaign of Donald Trump, he was talking about that we should ally ourselves with Russia or whatever, or at least work towards reconciliation and works towards preventing another Cold War with Russia. Now it seems like they continue the Cold War with Russia, and he was talking about that we need to pressure China, get favorable trade deals with China, stop allowing them to screw us over. and then now that he's president, to have cake and discuss a favorable trade, because it seems like, not really going tough on China. Probably, we just probably find a favorable trade deal with China that will ensure a long-standing, not long-standing alliance, but maybe a long-standing partnership with China, at least in the all the people that are in right now in Ukraine, people, they must really feel disappointed because they made some of them actually fell for it. They fell for the idea that there would be an American president, that finally they could work this over to some kind of agreement and maybe pressure the Kiev government out. It's already unfavorable and is a weak regime as it is. It's similar to the Spanish scenario of the 1930s during the Spanish Civil War, is that the Spanish Republic was weak. It was almost a political vacuum. And then Francisco Franco was able to take over afterwards, which led to a whole era of troubles and horrors that led under Francisco Franco, who allied himself with Adolf Hitler and was a fascist dictator that the United States backed throughout the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, until finally he died in 1975. By that point, his role in World War II was forgotten about pretty much, and he was just seen as a Cold War ally. And also, the United States also backed another fascist dictator in Portugal, Antonio Salazar, who led for a long time as well before he died. And now I think also Salazar was the leader that allowed Fulgencio Batista, the fascist dictator of Cuba from 1952 to 1959, to live in exile there, and then eventually came to Spain. And Francisco Franco allowed him to live there till he died in 1973. Fulgencio Batista did not die in jail, by the way. He escaped on the right when the revolutionaries were taking Cuba. And right now I see a lot. The media, the Facebook, I think we've been loaded recently with a lot of disdain towards the Latin American left. And I wonder what has brought that about. Why is it what's the sudden surge of negative opinions when it comes to Latin America's left? Is that it seems like that any time that anything is brought up about Hugo Chavez or Cuba or whatnot, it's talked about, and I think it's partially with the left. What it seems the left-to-right paradigm here in the United States is that they blame the failures that are going on right now in the United States. A lot of people on the Democrats, and they see the Democrats as communist or socialist, when not realizing they're just another fascist party. They're one of the two fascist parties, the Democrats and Republicans. The only difference between them is how overtly fascist they are. Whether the Republicans that have become more overtly corporatist / fascist, while the Democrats try to at least pretend that they're not, but they are in the end. With even some parts of the Republican Party, or it's all right or whatever, now actually pretty much openly have fascist views. People, and then there's people also Mark Dice or whatever that might not be exactly. Mark Dice actually, I wouldn't say that he actually has really fit into the alt-right so much. He just fits into the mainstream conservative crowd. It's weird how he went from a regular conspiracy author and somebody that I used to like, how he would talk about these Black Friday zombies or whatever, and how people would act like zombies and these consumerist crazes every Black Friday and stuff like that in the videos that he used to do. But now I can't respect Mark Dice because he's turned into a Trump mouthpiece and turned into a one more gatekeeper. It's keeping people into the establishment games by supporting an establishment president that is Donald Trump. And he's moved away from the message of the against the mainstream totally. Now he's moved towards just the right-wing mainstream. I guess, is what's happened. And, he doesn't seem much different than any really, host on Fox News or something like that, or Fox, maybe more, or Fox Business or something like that. Well, I would say maybe not quite Fox Business, because they have, more of a libertarian leaning. Well, Mark Dice, I don't think he's really a libertarian. I think Mark Dice is just he's I don't know what he exactly wants, to be honest, of what would be his political idea. He's somewhere along, it's funny that he actually told, he disses people he disses Glenn Beck so much, when in many ways him and Glenn Beck, at least back in the day, are similar. Now Glenn Beck's changed and apparently repudiated a lot of his conservative past, and that Donald Trump is an anti-Trumper, and he's also pro-Hillary Clinton, which it's been bizarre watching the turn Glenn Beck. And Alex Jones is also now. Alex Jones said in his child custody hearing, apparently, that it's a fake or whatever. His lawyer argued that it's a fake act or whatnot. He's not really that angry. Alex Jones goes over the top and makes conspiracy realists seem like just conspiracy theorists that rage about nothing and are foaming out the mouth. Some of the asinine things that he said on the radio, some of his acting more really is what makes people look like us, look crazy, foaming out the mouth, all red at the face, and it's been so many times. It's not like just one time here, one time there. In this 20 years, he's done that quite a bit. And there's also been, there was the one time in 1999 when during Y2K or whatever, he was talking about the world like it was ending. And, if you would listen to Alex Jones that night, you would actually think that maybe the world was ending. And, it's Alex Jones, throughout his 20 years, has brought about some good points and woke up some people, sure. But also Alex Jones has done a lot of damage to the truther community, and I think has held some truthers back, the ones that are still listening to him in 2017, which, honestly, I don't know who's still listening to Alex Jones in 2017. Not too many people that I know still listen to Mr. Jones. He's Alex Jones, to my knowledge, it's kind of out of relevance. Around 2014, 2015, he seemed like he, thinking less about him. I watched him in 2013, so that's about when I stopped watching him. And he used to say that all politicians are controlled by the New World Order, that there's no point in elections or whatnot. But now you see him, he got so involved with his 2016 election. You saw that he was involved with the little showdown with him and also another gatekeeper on the other side of the coin, the Democrat side of the coin, Cenk Uygur, who acts like an alternative media man, but really he was backing Hillary Clinton, stood for Hillary Clinton in this election. So Cenk Uygur, and also another thing about Cenk Uygur is that he denies the Armenian genocide, or at least did in the past, which the Armenian genocide, something, it's kind of odd. It's that if you deny the Armenian genocide or whatever, it's not that big of a deal, but you deny the Holocaust, and it's a humongous deal. Both events obviously happen, but it's weird that the amount of anger when you deny one versus the other, or you deny Stalin's or whatnot in the Soviet Union. It doesn't go quite a response like if you deny the Holocaust. And I know there's definitely, because of the white supremacist leanings towards people who deny the Holocaust or whatnot. But not everyone, in my experience, that denied the Holocaust was a white supremacist. Or or argued about the authenticity of the numbers during the Holocaust, that about the 6 million and 11 million total or whatnot. To me, I don't. That's one thing that honestly, the biggest conspiracy about the Holocaust and the Nazis or whatever is who's backed the Nazis, which was Wall Street and that big corporation, Ford Motor Corporation. That actually apparently Adolf Hitler had a Ford in his office called Henry Ford Inspiration. Henry Ford also received a very high award from the Nazis. He received actually what's the highest honor in Germany for a foreigner ever to receive, and Henry Ford received it, the highest honor in Germany. Also, there's other big corporations that backed the Nazis and also backed Francisco Franco's fascist in Spain. there was actually multiple corporations that were involved with that. But and was one of the big corporations backed by the Nazis. There was also IG Farben. There was many different corporations, and people say that the Nazis were able to get their money via book sales or whatnot, which of course that should raise my eyebrows. That the Nazis got a little bit more help in book sales. They got some help from big monetary sources, bankers like the Strasser brothers, and a lot of times were also Jewish, ironically, that supported the Nazi regime with some money. It was not, these people did not care about what happened to the Jewish compatriots in Germany. They just cared about how they could line their pocketbooks and how they could advance the plan for the greater project, the one world government, and all that. So these big bankers funded Adolf Hitler and his and the Nazis. And the same bankers are funding the neo-Nazis in Western Ukraine that have sympathies towards the original Nazi regime. Obviously, in some ways, Stefan Bandera, that they see like a national hero, when Stefan Bandera was a war criminal. They also see some of the Azov battalions have seen carrying around pictures of Adolf Hitler. But Stefan Bandera is being praised like a war hero via the media, or not via the media, via the government of Western Ukraine is it's an absolute disgrace to the people that were forced into camps or whatnot by Stefan Bandera and the other things that Stefan Bandera did. I mean, he was a absolute massacre. The man was an absolute brutal criminal and is not a man to ever be respected. But West Ukraine believes that apparently he deserves recognition. And it's just one more thing. It shows the Russophobia, is that they are trying to incite hatred against Russia. They're trying to instill in their people a undying hatred towards Russia, and as far to say that the Ukrainian government is willing to say that they should start war with the that they could fight in a war against Russia and win, which is absolutely crazy because the Ukrainian military is nowhere closer than the size to ever take on the Russian military. But the Russian military also probably even powerful than the United States military. Their stuff actually seems to work, while the American military is decline when it comes to stuff that doesn't work. And they spend a lot of money for stuff that doesn't work nowadays. The F-35 program, they spend billions of dollars on it for something that didn't work. Maybe one of the biggest military failures in history. And right now, that's why it gives me some optimism that, despite the fact that it seems like the drums of war are beating against Syria and Iran, at the same time, I think that gives me hope that knowing that the United States military might not be able to do one more regime change or two more regime changes, because of the fact that they just might not have the capability anymore, considering that the fact that their military is in a state of utter decline. Their military is, while they might, it's also another thing about their military is that their troops a lot of them are battle-worn. They've been fighting for 14 years, some of them, since the beginning of the Iraq War, and now it's 2017. They'll probably get more. They're getting more fresh batches of troops now, and it seems like the youngest generation, a lot of them are some of the most warlike, raised by war video games or whatnot. They've been desensitized to the realities of war. That's why it would be much harder to get 1 million Russians to fight in a war, a dumb war, than it would be to get 1 million Americans to fight in a useless war. Because 1 million Americans in a useless war, they would probably just go along on, slogans and, the fight for freedom or whatever is what the traditional ways to get Americans behind a war is that they would fall for it. But the Russians know the realities of war. And also, 1 million Americans might not know the realities of war until they actually seen it. That's why a lot of times the veterans are some of the biggest, some of the biggest enemies towards the military-industrial complex's push towards making more unnecessary war, because they know the realities of war, the horrors that the innocent civilians that are killed, men, women, and children slaughtered in drone strikes, food not being allowed in cities for weeks, water, becomes a scarce commodity, and it affects every aspect of life at a certain point, and the absolute destruction and the horrors and the sounds that you hear inside of war. It's like in Dresden or whatever is like one of the biggest examples of the war being brought about on the civilians, and this is not the other way around, the Axis bringing it to the Allies. This is the Allies bringing it to the Axis powers, actually, when Dresden was bombed and killed, some people say 100,000 people in one night were killed by the British military and the Royal Air Force when they carpet bombed Dresden towards the end of the war, an unnecessary bombing. The horrors that were talked about. They talked about that apparently the zoo was, that all the animals or whatever were, all distressed and as they were being, killed by the bombings. You could hear their horrified screeches, and Dresden was practically flattened by those bombings. It was absolutely devastating. 100,000 people possibly killed in one night. It was maybe the single biggest attack on a civilian population in one attack, one night ever in military history. And it was the British that actually did that. It was Winston Churchill. And that's before you ever, talk about Winston Churchill like a hero and Winston Churchill as courage or whatever. Just remember what his cowardly actions that he and his military were involved in at the end of World War II. And also remember that Churchill was a broke man that all of a sudden had a benefactor of like $2 million, gave him like $2 million, and all of a sudden he ran for prime minister and won. Then Winston Churchill came about from some pretty shady beginnings, and then Churchill didn't, I don't think he just landed on some money. I think that Churchill was, some people knew he was the right candidate to push the agenda that they wanted for Britain, and that's why they used Mr. Churchill in order to do that. And Churchill had been also high up in the British Navy at around the time when the Lusitania was sunk. And he could have probably warned the United States, or somebody in the British Navy could have warned the United States that there were German submarines out the way. That I believe the British had broke through the German code, so they knew where the submarine positions were at, but they wanted the Lusitania to sink in order to justify the United States entrance into World War I, which was really, when you think about it, the first war that we really had no point in. We had no part in World War I, but we got into this war in Europe, and we had no part in order to strangle the Central Powers. And then after that, after the German Empire fell apart, the British took over the little piece of that Ottoman Palestine, and they gave it to the Zionists a few years later, about 30 years later. They gave it to the Zionists, and then all the Palestinians were forced to leave. It was Palestine for a long time before it was Israel. And the people that said Palestine never exists, just look at any old map or whatever, and you see Palestine there. Some of the Palestinians that have, I believe that they have a passport, or on American passports or whatever, you can actually get where, if you were born in Palestine way back in the day, before this creation of the State of Israel, you can have either or on there. So you could have it say Palestine as your birthplace, and I guess some of the Palestinians that live here in the United States, but not to live. I don't think too many Palestinians live in the United States in the first place. One of a prominent Palestinian American would be Justice Font, who the congressman. He's actually half Palestinian himself, and he says he supports a two-state solution, which two-state solution sounds good on paper, but it's unrealistic. And ultimately, how I see it, that is the fix is that they should be all the land to go back to Palestine. It's their land originally took the land from them. Why should they only have to give back half of all the stuff that they stole? They stole the entire strip from them practically. Palestinians live in the toilet of this giant house. The Israeli strip, they're in the toilet. a few specks in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and that's it. Anyone that's listening right now and listening live, I'm talking about on the original broadcast, 12:39 Eastern Time here in St. Petersburg, Florida. If you want to call in, we have about 50 minutes left of the live show. And there's going to be 2 hours going to go into UCY tonight regardless, because that's all the time slot for. I can actually go for 3 hours if I wanted to here at Blog Talk Radio. But the first 2 hours is what we have the what I call the actual live broadcast or whatnot, and then we have the studio hour, which is the 1 hour afterwards. So technically, if I really wanted to, which I doubt I'll be going that late, I could stay on air till 2:30 Eastern Time. But if you want to call in, the number to call in here at Blog Talk Radio is 845-277-9223. 845-277-9223. I remember, I had the old number memorized in my head, the old call number for this show, and this is by the way on Stabled, which to all the people that listen to UCY regularly and are interested in listening to shows that prior to when I came on to UCY, Stabled Radio is the home for all these old shows. Used to be ran by a guy named James Ward, who he was the founder of Stabled Radio along with some other other host, Cole Johnson, and was one other guy who founded it besides those two. Who was it? And Sean Alton, who left pretty early on as well from the network. And then we also had a few other known hosts that came about. And then for a long time, it was me airing on there in the UCY June 2015, and I've been there since. Glad to be there on there. Stabled Radio is the home for a lot of old shows. If you want to check that out, definitely come here, check out some of my old shows where I interviewed like top activists. Successfully, I interviewed Rosalind Fuller on here twice from Archie. I interviewed Ray Lewis, the famous occupier that used to be the chief of police of Philadelphia. I interviewed Dean Capone, a pretty interesting interview, which was he was at one point was going to be a Socialist Party of the United States political candidate. He was on the show a few years ago, August, I think it was August of 2014. Dave Monsanto was interviewed on here twice. We had some pretty good interviews on here. And Daryl Sherney, who was a Green Party candidate for president, was on here back on May 31st. Yeah, that's correct. He was on there May 31st. That was actually pretty cool because that was the day before I graduated high school. And that was I did that interview, like literally just about within 11 hours of graduating high school. That was the interview I did. And let's see, what else? Who else did I interview on this show? Thinking of some of my other interviews. I believe I have more than that. And then there was some, of course, I did on UCY or whatever that summer. So I think that might have been just about it for my time on Stabled Radio. Trying to think. Stuart Alexander came on the show, former Socialist Party of the United States candidate, came on the show one time, and that was actually, and also some other, a couple other guys came on here in summer 2015. Well, I was already at UCY, but I did the show separate here at Stabled Radio. I think it was in July 2015. It was summer 2015. Also, what's going on around the world is that here on the last day of April, clashes continue in Venezuela, but there was we had the massive counter rally against the opposition in Venezuela. So they're not showing you that there's millions of people that are in support of the Chavista government, and also the fact is that they're not showing you the full story in the mainstream media, that the hoarding that's going on by the big supermarket chains, they're hostile to the Maduro government, that's causing partially part of the food shortages. And also another thing that they try to make it seem like is that all the food in the country, that that there's all all the food chains are controlled by the Bolivian government of Venezuela, which is inaccurate because they only have one food chain, which is for the poor of the country, is where they can get goods at subsidized cost. They have a government supermarket chain, and then they have all the other private supermarket chains. Most of the economy of Venezuela is private, actually, which is one thing they try to make you tell you that it's a communist, a totally communist economy, planned economy or whatnot, when that's not actually the case. It is a mixed economy, I guess is what you could say. And as well, another thing that's going on inside of Venezuela is we have all these clashes and whatnot. What they don't tell you is that what the right wing has done is that they've done these acts of violence to try to make it seem like these are peaceful protesters being attacked by the Venezuelan government or imprisoned by the Venezuelan government for no reason. When they have done stuff to deserve being imprisoned by the Venezuelan government, these people are criminals. These people are thugs that are, and you have people like Leopoldo Lopez that, because of maybe up to 43 people were killed. He's sitting in jail. He's rotting in jail for the next 13 years. Leopoldo, that they screamed, that this is a political prisoner or whatnot. My opinion is that Leopoldo Lopez is not in prison because of political reasons. He's in prison for criminal reasons. And, also what he wants to push is, the far right of the country. These are the fascists of the country that are some of these people who go out on the streets of Caracas in order to protest against Maduro, against Diosdado Cabello, the whole Bolivian government, Tariq Al-Sami. At this point, they call a recall referendum. It brings the vice president of Venezuela, who is a strong Chavista. So a strong Chavista, became the vice president. That's why the opposition is not really pushing for a recall referendum. They're trying to impeach Maduro. I think they're trying to call May for hoping to push an early election. And the election's coming up next year or whatever, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with potentially. I think that Maduro might not be running next year. I think Maduro might be sitting this one out and maybe Diosdado Cabello should run, because the fact is that Maduro isn't exactly so popular in Venezuela. But again, it's being exaggerated, the amount of hate towards him, and that he has a lot of supporters in this country. And Chavez had even more supporters. And Chavez had, I think, about 70% of the country probably supported Hugo Chavez. The opposition, of course, has been some loyal opposition. These people have been loyal to Henry Capriles. Been inciting hate towards the Chavez control. But now the numbers seem to have grown for the opposition as they're pulling on naivety of the Venezuelan people, similar to what they were able to do in Argentina with Mauricio Macri. They were saying, things are pretty good under Cristina Kirchner, but you should give that all up so you can become, rich. You can become rich like the Americans, not also talk about the American problem with poverty, where 50% of the people here are in poverty. It's actually, I think 50% of the people work for under $30,000 a year here in the United States. Think about that. These are people working for $10, $11 an hour. That's half the people of this country. That is not what really a first world country where the cost of living is as high as it is here. There should not be wages that are paid to the people. And I'm not saying that the answer is a minimum wage hike, because that's a temporary Band-Aid. But the problem is our money. Our Federal Reserve continues to inflate, and the bankers continue to play games with our money because we allow Rothschild bankers to control our currency, and then we continue being robbed, and we continue our money becomes more and more worthless. Venezuela does not have the Rothschilds in charge of their bank, so they don't have that kind of games being played. But what's being played against them is economic sanctions. They're also being played in economic warfare inside the country, internal sabotage from corporations in the country. That's why, in my opinion, the next step should be, to bust up these bigger corporations inside of Venezuela. They need to be dealt with, and also dealt with the political opposition that seem to be pushing as far, and I think might have secretly in their plans they want the United States to intervene in Venezuela on behalf of them. These people are traitors. These people are treasonous, and anybody that is involved with these riots, that's what it is, the riots. So, it's funny is that you have the same Trump supporters complain about riots here in the United States and whatnot, will be in favor of riots being done by right-wing protesters inside of Venezuela. It was Ferguson within Baltimore. The riots that happened there, they were angry. They were pissed off at those guys for rioting, but they are not angry at what they're doing in Venezuela. A lot worse in acts of terrorism that are being committed by right-wing terrorists. Just remember what Orlando Portillas did, I believe is the guy's, or no, Orlando Bosch, who was the right-wing terrorist that attacked a airliner, is that the history of the Latin American right has terrorists in it, and it is nothing really that new that these fascists resort to these extreme means in order to push their politics on, and so what they're doing the definition of terrorism. If they're using acts of terror in order to sway people to their political beliefs. So that's exactly what we are seeing inside of the that's exactly what we're seeing in Venezuela right now with the acts of the right-wing protesters, and I put the protesters in quotations. They're either not protesters. A lot of these people are being paid agents, probably being paid directly by the United States Embassy in Caracas. It's a lot of times that they say that a military might not be as powerful as the United States Embassy, and that the United States Embassy has the power to, with a little bit of money, make people sabotage against their own government and sabotage against their best own interest. The people of Venezuela are much better off with the Chavista government than they would be with any government with Henrique Capriles, or any of the other people that are in the right-wing opposition, Ramos Ayub. I think those guys, especially probably Ramos Ayub, because I'll tell you something about him, is that he's one of the old-timers from the good old days of Venezuela. The good old, there's that people that say stuff like, oh, yeah, Venezuela used to be such a nice country. When people say that Venezuela used to be such a nice country, it kind of reminds me of the people that, say that in Chile or whatever, that Chile used to be such a nice country there when they had a fascist dictator that used to throw deaths helicopters. That was to almost the same extreme that Carlos Andrés Perez was a dictator that went to extreme means in order to keep control of his country. Carlos Andrés Perez was the right-wing dictator of Venezuela throughout the 1970s, and he was again in the 90s before they found him on corruption and Rodrigo Chavez being released out of prison. But Carlos Andrés Perez was one of the most brutal dictators in South America. It was part of Condor, and throughout his time, one of the worst things that he did was 1989 Carazaco, where up to some estimates, 1,000 protesters were killed by the Venezuelan government at the time, and it all started based on pretty much what they're saying is similar to our crisis they say is going on right now about food shortages, price hikes, and there was also looting ultimately ensued, and there was protests February 27th, 1989 up to in the weeks after. It's believed up to about 3,000 protesters were killed by the Venezuelan government, and this led to a massive upheaval by the people against the Venezuelan government, that they really started to get at what was going on. Then 1992, General Hugo Chavez was able to start a military coup against the government of Carlos Andrés Perez. However, it failed on February 4th, 1992, which he was thrown in prison for 2 years for that, until they realized that Carlos Andrés Perez was also involved with heavy corruption. And actually, that corruption case was brought to the Venezuelan Supreme Court by one of Chavez's future vice presidents, also he was actually an older activist that had been around from like the 1960s, which was and had ran in the presidential run before. Rangel brought the Supreme Court case to them, and they took Carlos Andrés Perez out of power, and I believe Rafael Caldera was the president in the years afterwards, who Rafael Caldera was also in the Andrés Perez circle and was there also in the early, I think the late 60s actually. Both those two leaders, as I put in quotations, leaders, died in the latter part of, or they both died around 2009, 2010. Andrés Perez died in 2010 in Miami. Now that same government, however, Ramos Ayala belonged to that same government, is now seeking to try to regain power in Venezuela. A little over, just about 20 years later. Now it's been about 19 years since the election that brought about Hugo Chavez to power. His party was formed about 20 years ago, the MVR. And prior to the MVR, was or after the MVR, there was the PSUV, the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, a conglomeration of the different leftist parties inside of Venezuela. Going on in Venezuela is that this is all out economic sabotage. It's the Robert Mugabe in his economic war with the West or whatnot, and the sanctions, and they got to the point where they end up having to force his currency to defeat, and then he ended up using the Chinese yuan. Is that I feel like that's what they're doing to the Boulevard with also people like the one guy that runs Dollar Today. This is not just some guy that's running a website. It's part of a bigger plan of economic warfare by the bankers against Venezuela, similar to what they did against Zimbabwe. But what gives me some hope in the whole situation is that Mugabe dealt with all that for from the 90s and 2000s, but he's still standing today, and he's still alive, and he's actually 93 now, and he's still leading his country. They say, though, it's kind of funny, is that they say Robert Mugabe's going to run again in 2018, 94 years old. So you expect him maybe to finish off his term at 98 years old in 2022, which hopefully I kind of just have to root for the guy because, I see how much they try to attack his country and what he's trying to do for his own people, and also trying to erase the the colonialism on his country. I have to kind of root for the guy. Is that the guy seems to absolutely, I'm hoping that he makes it to 2022, 98 years old or whatever. But I hope at that point he finally retires, maybe in the last few years. But, I feel like with Mugabe, that he's, unstoppable in some ways. The guy might be around another 10 more years or something like that. Hopefully. Keeps him around 10 more years. They go as far to call him Black Hitler or whatever, and there's all these things, the real bullshit. And, the people that usually push these claims, the white genocide claims, is that they say that he's pushing some kind of genocide against white people because he's taking away some of the stolen land that former British took from the people of Zimbabwe and giving it back to the people of Zimbabwe. That's white genocide, according to some people. There's definitely probably some countries where in Africa, I'm not sure if there really is, where it might not be a really good thing to be white. Zimbabwe, I don't think, is one of them. And I knew a girl actually whose mom was from Zimbabwe in person, and she told me that a lot of those claims were bullshit about that the people were treated so badly in Zimbabwe or whatever. And I feel like Mugabe. I only had one person ever really tell me about Mugabe, but I'm pretty sure it's like almost like Tito or whatever. That it's not. It's a lot of made up bullshit. And there's not really a lot of things to back it up. With Tito, I met. Actually, I think it was Friday. We were talking about Tito, and we were talking. They try to compare him to Soviet leaders, whatever. When he would ask certain questions in the Soviet Union, as a journalist, you'd be in trouble. But in Yugoslavia, that wasn't really the case. I think in some ways it's comparable. Yugoslavia, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, there's all one common denominator. That you could say they were left nationalists, and that's probably made the most hated system by the Venezuelan, or not by the Venezuelan, but by the people, the elite that run everything. It's that because ultimately it's made the real form of nationalism. When you talk about economic nationalism and a nationalism preserving the culture of the country, is that these people are the globalists that want to, erase national boundaries and also in favor of those corporate elite. When you give the corporation, when you take away the corporate's power and give it to the people, you're eliminating that part. And also, when you preserve your own culture, you're eliminating part of erasing borders because you are wanting to preserve and keep the culture of your country, which is which in Venezuela, I think that more, people in the Chavez era were proud to be Venezuelan, while not so much Andres Perez. And, one of the major things that exists in Latin America and exists in other parts of the world is envy of the Americans. But I think in Chavez Venezuela, that went away. Everybody wants to be American. Everybody wants to mimic America. America's on the hill. It's a great country in many regards, but when it comes to so much prosperous and so much superior to everyone else, that's why. The American people are definitely a friendly people. A lot of them are very hardworking people, and there's definitely good traits about the American people to be admired. But when it comes to our society, when it comes to our culture, our culture right now, our culture of consumerism and greed, these are not good things. And when it comes to our economic system of corporations, dominating the economy, small businesses being ran out of town, and the average worker being trampled upon by corporations, the way they treat their employees. And more people have to work for these corporations because they're becoming more and more of the economy. That's not something to be admired. But everybody, a lot of people in the countries like Colombia, Mexico, want to become Americans. They want to mimic Americans in their culture. And all corporate in the disgusting lack of originality that exists in some of our culture nowadays, is that what they want to mimic down there, rather than following the rich and cultural history that they have in Mexico and their culture. Also in Colombia and other countries in South America. And also what's totally been forgotten about via years of European colonization, on top of neoliberalism from the United States, the culture in Mayan ancestors that that a lot of these people have a lot of the blood from. Just remember that the mestizo people that are a lot of Latin America, mestizos are a mix of Incan, Mayan, or with the Spanish blood. So the blood of these people definitely exists, and those were the original inhabitants of these countries. And they love to say that Spanish or that the English discovered what over here in the New World. It's not true. They conquered these places. There were definitely people here that didn't discover anything. These places have been discovered tens of thousands of years ago by people coming from Asia across the land bridge. But they were conquered just a few hundred years ago by the European powers and totally reshaped their futures. And that's why America looks the way it is that we have the British came over here, and also many other European powers came to the west. Spain came over, came over to a lot of Latin America, and then we also have countries like Portugal. The Dutch got involved. I think even Belgium was here at one point. We had Scottish. We had many different countries were over here in the New World in the earlier years, and probably the biggest traces of the culture, the English, the Spanish, the French. We see in North America, we have Mexico, Spanish-speaking country. We have the United States, an English-speaking country. And then we have Canada, which is a French-speaking country. But across the third world, there's a lot of envy, I think, unfortunately, for the Americans, and it's often in countries that are where there's the strongest traces of neoliberalism and imperialism, and countries such as Colombia, countries such as in the Middle East, perhaps maybe like Jordan, or maybe even like the United Arab Emirates or whatever. Which it's kind of funny is like you have a lot of people in the United States that like want to travel to the United Arab Emirates, and they like the flashy culture, the Lamborghinis as cop cars and stuff like that. They like that whole
future, but they don't realize is that in the Arab Emirates that you speak out just one thing against their monarch or whatnot, they probably throw you in jail. I'm pretty sure the United Arab Emirates, when it comes to political crimes or whatever, they treat, or political dissidents, they treat that just as seriously almost as any other Gulf state. The Americans' support for the Gulf states hypocrisy to the finest when it comes to, they talk about human rights, they talk about all these other crimes against humanity in different countries they justify intervention in whatever country, whether it's Venezuela, whether it's in North Korea. And also, North Korea was built up right there. There's a talk that day now that may potentially the United States strike North Korea or whatever. I don't think North Korea is a country that been preparing for this moment for a long time. Is that I don't think North Korea is going to be as easy as Iraq, Afghanistan, or other countries that the regime, like Iran, is not one of the big boys now. Is that Iran, North Korea, even potentially talk about Russia one day, which Russia is a military superior to the United States. I would think that the United States would win in a war with Russia. Not win a war with Iran, and I think there's a possibility that they would lose a war with Iran. Same thing with North Korea, because of the fact that the state is not the military, and also that I don't know if the United States soldiers are as hardened as the people of Iran and North Korea, their troops have became. At this point, the Iranians are also battle trained. They've done battle training in Syria from multiple conflicts. Where some of these people, in recent history, they also were involved with the Iran-Iraq war. So Iran knows what total war is like. So they're prepared for what the United States could bring at them. That probably was the first time that the United States attempted to overthrow the Iranian government back in Saddam Hussein, and when Saddam Hussein invaded. Remember, not only the United States backed Saddam Hussein, but other Western countries, the Soviet Union backed the Iraqi government against the Iranian government in the Iraq-Iran war, which the Soviet Union did not have very good relations with Iran, but now Russia has good relations with Iran. It's a different story. And also Iraq nowadays is a different story because it's no longer really strictly pro-American, and you could actually say it's may turn into a pro-Iranian regime because of how they perceive that we are back in ISIS, and they know this for a fact, that the fight against ISIS is not legitimate. Like the United States is claiming that they are legitimately fighting ISIS. This has nothing to do with the Assad regime or whatever. I think Iraq has seen through that, and they realize that a lot of the horror that's being inflicted on their country is by the fact of the United States, and that the United States backs ISIS, and they continue to, and the Israel back ISIS, and the United States is working together to stabilize the Middle East. The Israeli government it's actually been, apparently they were apologized by ISIS for accidentally hitting their troops or something like that. ISIS has shown more and more that they definitely with Western entities, and you saw what happened at Deir el-Zor back in September 2016, is that they said that they were attacking ISIS. They accidentally hit the Syrian army troops to kill 106 of them, and the United States acts like no big deal. They were fighting ISIS, and ISIS then starts the next few months to take over Deir el-Zor. It's like you probably contribute partially that may to one strategic hit towards the potential defeat of Assad's troops in Deir el-Zor, which that's like an island of ISIS territory out in eastern Syria. It's probably eastern Syria is the places where the United States airstrikes have been hitting in favor of ISIS, and over in western Syria is probably where more of the Russian airstrikes have hit. And then you have one side ISIS controlling a lot of eastern Syria, and then the Syrian Arab Army controlling a lot of western Syria. And also remember is that together, ISIS, Syrian, they say the more moderates are fighting, but really they don't really have the truth fighting the Assad regime. And another thing that's happening at the border between Israel and Syria is that there's a pocket of ISIS support right at the border, and they don't do anything. The Israeli military, they talk about they opposed Islamic terrorism and how they're a big partner with us against Islamic terrorism, but again, they didn't do anything really to stop Islamic terrorism right at their border. What they do attack is people that are fighting Islamic terrorism, like the Assad regime. They attack Bashar al-Assad's troops in Syria, but they don't attack ISIS themselves. They don't attack Al-Qaeda. They don't attack the Free Syrian Army. They actually heal Wahhabi troops in the hospitals in Israel. And I think they've been caught on video before, help or training ISIS troops. As the alternative acronym for ISIS goes, the Israeli Secret Intelligence Services, which is that seems to be the reality more and more as we listen to as we see what's going on. We need to, it's more and more important to get the truth out about what's going on in Syria, in Ukraine, and other countries right now, because we don't know when the big war will happen. We don't know when martial law happens, and it'll be much harder to get information out. Recently, I passed out some leaflets at my and it was actually pretty successful, and I got some, I think, pretty positive reactions. I think I might do that again this week. And it was kind of funny because the nearest copy machine to my house is at the little, they have like a little public library in there. I use their library and start passing out pamphlets, and I do a recording myself of me passing around or whatever. I'm going to probably do another one, and this time I'll actually get good videos I can post online. Me doing this again. It was a pretty interesting experience, and some people seem pretty grateful. Some people, of course, were like, "Oh no, I already know about the situation in Syria." I'm like, do you? I mean, I feel like there's a lot of people that often say they know because they watch CNN, they watch MSNBC, they watch Fox News or whatever, and or they get it from other mainstream media sources, whether it's the online ones, Huffington Post or the Washington Post, all these absolutely terrible fake news that exist on across the mainstream media. And the term fake news, they love to say that nowadays, is that MSNBC, CNN, Fox, that's the real fake news. There's no, the real news is pretty much, the real news, I don't know, that would be the alternative media. There's RT, Press TV, that's getting better, and then all the different, smaller sources, Mint Press News or whatnot. Of course, they all have their little errors, but, they're definitely better than watching the mainstream media. And then, different hosts like ourselves here, we try our best to get a fact-based, and, I put a lot of opinion into my shows and do a lot of talking in detail about the same subject. But we're trying to disseminate as best as we can what is going on around us in these different countries. And another thing that's been forgotten about a lot is the Palestinian-Israeli scenario. And I was talking with my would have been my guest earlier, Kochetova, and she was saying that I was saying that, in many ways it's similar, the Ukrainian situation to the Israeli situation or the Palestinian situation. That the people of eastern Ukraine are being subjected towards a regime that says they don't deserve independence, that they are Ukrainians and they want to keep the country together, but at the same time they treat them as lower, they treat them as like foreigners, they treat them as non-citizens, while at the same time saying that they are forced to be part of Ukraine. It's really an occupation, while the same thing with Israel, they say that all that land is Israeli or whatever, and that that the people of that they supposedly treat these Palestinians, fairly or like themselves, but in reality they are treated as subhuman. They're treated as as you see these Zionist rabbis, they see them as subhuman. They see them as servants for the Israeli people and the Israeli government, they are not treated as citizens. They're treated as low. And by the way, if anybody wants to call in, the call-in number again is 845-277-9223. 845-277-9223. By the way, if you're listening to the replay of this later, you're going to try calling into the usual call-in number at UCY, because this is just a recording that you're listening to. I was hoping to have a guest on tonight, but it doesn't appear that it's going to happen this week or whatever. We will hopefully be getting a guest next week, and some sort of May. That's what we'll hopefully get the same guest on. With different technical difficulties that were going on, plus Blog Talk Radio's. So if you use the mobile version of Blog Talk Radio, to all the people that are inquiring about using Blog Talk Radio for a platform to record shows off of, the one good thing again is that they do have the 2-hour, 3-hour shows or whatever. You can do 2 hours plus a studio hour, so 3-hour totals of shows for your shows here at the Voice of or for your shows, new shows. But the thing is that a lot of the they have like two little options. Like there's one that's invite guest / co-host, and then you have like a Skype button, but they're not even available if you have a regular phone. So you're a So if you are using the phone version, you're going to be pretty limited. One cool thing I guess you can use on Blog Talk Radio is you can upload audio clips or whatever. But of course, if you're doing any kind, it's always like audio clips. You always have to be careful, because it's like if you're uploading to YouTube or whatever, the copyright laws or whatever. That's why you only use Immortal Technique, because a long time ago we got cleared to use Immortal Technique by one of my co-hosts who met Immortal Technique and said he was cool to use on our show. But and we used Payday Monsanto before that because I knew Payday Monsanto on Facebook. I've interviewed him a couple times. Very interesting artist. He does quite a bit of music. Check out his music on YouTube. I think his YouTube channel is Grand One Angel. And we got about 12 minutes left of the show, so I'm going to get into maybe perhaps of the show here on the UCY recording, and then I guess maybe I might go a little bit later, but only 2 hours can fit into the UCY show. So talking about what's going on been going on right now, it's kind of, it's kind of weird what what's going on right now. That apparently there's like a little bit of fallout between Canada and the United States. I think it's mostly a show, but I always wondered what it'd be like if maybe Canada ever. That'd be a pretty weird future if like Canada ever like side with Russia or whatever, and they would just like make some gigantic like northern alliance between the Canadians and Russia. They're the two biggest countries in the world by area, so that would be a very strategic and important alliance if they ever created one. And I think that would bring about just about the end for the United States empire if it existed. Of course, it's probably not going to happen. And Trump has been, as you could say, made the vanilla Obama. He has made weapon deals with the Saudis. He's taken a pretty strong pro-Israeli stand. And yes, at one point he had a pretty favorable war with Fidel Castro, but he, when it comes to Latin America's left and fighting the enemies that really oppose Latin America's left, if he doesn't, he still is pro-Zionist, which one of the biggest Latin America's left is the Zionists, and they're one of the biggest enemies to Cuba. So it's ironic, is that, again, he apparently kind of ship or whatever, because I think that Pierre Trudeau and Fidel Castro were somewhat some bit of a personal relationship. I don't know exactly what's the full details on that. Fidel Castro course, a very controversial figure. So when he said those words, the kind words of Fidel Castro's passing, it gained a lot of hate here in the United States. And, of course, there was, Donald Trump's strong words, Marco Rubio's strong words, and Ted Cruz's strong words, which, when it comes to Fidel Castro, just remember is that, he's facing an embargo for a long time from an economic warfare. Well, a lot of his people to go through was because of the embargo. And, that there were not medicines or whatnot. The embargoes always affect the people of the country and governments of the country. Embargoes are an act of war. Sanctions are an act of war. And what they're doing against Russia, what they're doing against multiple different countries. But, the thing is that Russia and these countries today are much more prepared for sanctions. And, it's like for a lot of the suffering that was caused in North Korea throughout the years, with people having tough times was because of the sanctions that they imposed on a country. But now they're practically self-reliant. That's one thing that North Korea learned to be was that throughout the 90s they had massive problems. They had the famine happen, and they've adjusted since. They've recovered since the famine. But back in the 1990s, it was a totally different story. Is that the country went through some massive problems, and it's like also with Zimbabwe, is that they devalued their currency to the point of it not existing anymore practically. It's also what they did to the German Deutschmark in the 1920s, is that their money was at one point worth like 4.3 Reichsmarks to $1, and then later was 4.3 trillion Reichsmarks or Deutschmarks to $1. So it went from something to a worth absolutely nothing, and it was only like in a matter of 3 years it happened. It's called hyperinflation that they're able to force on the economy. They forced hyperinflation on Zimbabwe. They're trying to enforce it on Venezuela now. It's a strategy that they use, and they're going to continuing to use it different third world countries, and that's why it's important for self-reliance, for economic independence for a country, or else they'll fall victim to economic warfare. The same strategy that they've used multiple before will be successful again. And also, a lot of times in these countries is that when they start a war or whatever, there's suffering that happens from the effects of war, like what's going on in eastern Ukraine, is that we have the wars going on, and these people, a lot of them can't get basic things such as food and water. So this is affecting the people significantly. It's causing a humanitarian catastrophe for the people of Donetsk, the people of Lugansk, and hopefully it will come to an end. And also hopefully I can bring my guest on. And if you haven't checked out the Humanitarian Battalion of Ireland UK is a group that helps if you're willing to contribute. Check them out on Facebook, and they also have like a link where you can donate to them. The Humanitarian Battalion of Ireland UK, they help with different aspects of humanitarian aid. They are a non-combat organization. They are purely in the interest of humanitarian needs for the people there in Eastern Ukraine affected by the war. Right now they are over 3 years deep into a war that has killed, I think, over 10,000 Ukrainians. It's a civil war at this point for sure. It's no longer going to be described as clashes and violence. This is definitely a war. And this is right now what we're seeing is similar to Syria, but it's a little bit different. Is that the government is backed by the United States, and these people, the rebels, are fighting for independence, and they are not backed by the United States. The rebels are fighting in Syria are backed by the United States, and the government is trying to protect its role in defending its people from the bankers and the other economic vultures that want to seize on Syria. And right now, actually, we have only 4 minutes and 43 seconds left of the live stream. So that means after that, there will be no more callers will be allowed. The number's going to be 845-277-9223. 845-277 here at Stabled Radio, and later on replay to all the people at UCY.tv. To all the people that were listening here at Stabled Radio, have been waiting for this show to come up on Blog Talk Radio. I know we went the entire year 2016 without doing a single thing for this show here. Again, is that pretty much everyone else that was here at Stabled Radio has pretty much left the network, and I left and worked on UCY as my primary network and I'm still working there as my primary network. I've been there since 2015. I used this little side network to do a couple shows after I left for UCY, I was using this today as hoping that I could bring my guest on from Eastern Ukraine and record the show here and then port it over to UCY later. But I'll probably be doing a few more things here in the next few months or whatever, potentially, because I want some more guests overseas on the show, and I also try to do it at earlier times because a lot of times it's that I can't do a show at 9 p.m. because my guests it's 4 a.m. or whatever over there. Even though I've worked with some people, I had like Sergey Bartashov or whatever who it was like 3 a.m. or whatever when we did the show back in February. But I try to avoid that as making a guest come on at very odd times, going on in the middle of the night practically. A couple of my guests have been very nice enough to do that. Like Sergey Bartashov did in late February. He came on at I think it was 3 a.m. local time there, and then 1 a.m. local time there, and the show ended about 3 a.m. local time there. This guest would have been coming on, if he was to come on tonight, it would have been 4 a.m., and the show would have ended at 6 a.m. local time in Ukraine. And they're, I think, 7 hours ahead. They're on Moscow time, which I didn't know was 7 hours. That's not Moscow time, it was 9 hours ahead. Tuesday, I know where was going with that, but we're about 2 minutes left of the live stream at this point. In South America right now, there's a lot of turmoil going on between different countries, and we have finally Venezuela is about to leave the Organization of American States. It's been a long time an enemy towards progressive or against the left nationalist regimes in South America. Progressive term for left nationalist is a good term for the regimes that they take a strong stand. These different countries that they've had they've taken a strong stance against, and they've Cuba or whatever, they've been a long time an enemy towards the they've been a long time an enemy towards these regimes there, and the Organization of American States is finally a good thing that Venezuela is finally getting out of the Organization of American States. What they should be working towards is UNASUR and working towards Banco del Sur and continuing the project that Chavez wanted, which was a united South America with a bank that opposed the World Bank and the big banks. And hopefully, May next year, Lula will be elected in Brazil, and maybe Marcio Macri will be thrown out of power. Paraguay will vote out their current corrupt leader. Colombia will also vote in somebody of the pro-Bolivarian part of the country, and they'll finally be able to work together to make a unified South America that opposes imperialism. And I think this is about the point where we'll be cutting off later on the recording for UCY. We will be, in fact, going to be, counting the bumpers. It's only a 1 hour, 56-minute show. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in at UCY. Have a good night. And be back next week, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. But I'll keep airing here at Stable Radio for a few minutes or whatnot. Yeah, because it's about an hour 56 minutes is about our is a runtime usually for a show at UCY. Kind of the bumpers, or actually, no, it would actually be cut off. Sorry, it would actually be cut off. I misjudged that. It's only a minute bumper, or about a minute 30 second bumper at the beginning, and a minute bumper at the end. So it'd actually be about here probably would be where we're a couple minutes more actually before we cut off. But yeah, now we're officially in the studio hour here, so there'll be no more call-ins at here on Blog Talk Radio. As we just passed 1:30 Eastern Time here on the live broadcast. So I think anybody that's listening in right now, I forgot how it works on Blog Talk Radio, but I think you can continue to listen in. It's just that if you're calling in, you get booted off. Or no, if you didn't call in yet, you can't call in after that time. Well, Voice of Rebellion Radio has now been in UCY almost 2 years or whatnot, and it's kind of crazy that a lot of stuff I was talking about a while ago seems to be happening. Just not under the Obama administration. I kind of expected a lot of stuff to happen under the Obama administration. The entrance in Syria and whatnot. It's now happening and I expected next it was going to be Hillary Clinton, but like many people, we were pretty surprised when Donald Trump became the president, and now Donald Trump is the next one selected by the government, or selected by the shadow government. And what's funny is that the shadow government is no longer that much of a conspiracy theory. It's out in the open now more that the shadow government is a with all these people that are really behind the Council of Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Committee or whatnot. It's like all this more of this information is coming out in the open. And, well, actually, I'll say there's a lot of people, unfortunately, still just believe, though, the CNN and MSNBC, and I think that the real puppet masters of Trump are the Russians or whatever, when, of course, this phony Donald Trump-Russia connection that keeps being pushed in the media. I've yet to find any real. There's no. The only thing that might exist might be maybe some of the corrupt oligarchs that are against Putin are working with Trump, but I don't. That's not important. Who the Israeli connections, the Rothschild connections are the ones that are actually real and can be backed by reality. It can be backed with proof, but here's the thing about Donald Trump. You actually need to be first with it. When it comes to oligarchs over there, because George Bush, Bush's brother had connections with the infamous Russian oligarch Boris Berezovsky. Of course, is that these are oligarchs hostile to Putin. So there's establishment working with these corrupt oligarchs over there, with Berezovsky, Horodowski, who has like a partner business with the Rothschilds in London. They are definitely tied together, the American elite and all the elite all around the world. Like also China and the other super powerful billionaire families. I think that soon the plan for I think that the plans for over here, the one thing they talk about is that the United Nations will eventually come over here with troops and that they're going to occupy the United States. I don't know if that's. I think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be part of the martial law or whatever. What's going to be interesting to see is who's brought over here. I think that also will be the United States military themselves who will be occupying the streets and will be doing the martial law. I mean, they were working on the martial law in 2015 with Operation Jade Helm. There's no doubt that the Operation Jade Helm was actually was a operation to prepare for it. And, some people try to denounce and say that it was not, or trying to say that the claims were bogus and that they were just another military exercise. But those were unseen, unseen military exercises. This is like the first time we've seen military exercises that size preparing for a scenario. And then, as us people in the truther media denounce this military exercises as a step towards martial law, they just say whatever. They say, oh, yeah, you're wearing too much tinfoil hats or whatever. You believe that the girls are going to make you gay or something like that. They always go to the extremes of what we believe. Or, apparently, I don't know if Alex Jones actually said that about, the water making the frogs gay, which, I think I know what he's talking about, which was the claim by some black scientists that there was water being pumped into the urban cities that had some chemical or whatever that made frogs gay. So it was like saying that was making the youth gay. I didn't read too much into it. But Alex Jones, he makes a lot of there's a lot of other stuff that he said or whatever years that made people distrust the truthers because they thought that we were crazy like him. One of the things that made him look crazy, of course, was that Doomsday broadcast on December 31st, 1999. Alex Jones has been around since 1995. He's one of the biggest names in there, and of course I have to give him credit for credit's due, is that he did wake some people up, but he's done more damage than good to the truther. I say he's done more damage than good to the truther community. Same thing with other truthers like Mark Dice. I used to stick up for Mark Dice, but I can't stick up for him anymore. Mark Dice, he gives off too much of that. When it comes to like impression, is a rich douchey kid and moved out to California, thinks he's smarter than everyone else, and in reality, is just pushing the same stuff that Fox News practically pushes out with a little bit of truth in there. And it used to, it's went away. I still don't see him even mentioning stuff like New World Order and stuff like that. I see him mentioning liberal media. It's no longer the elite ran media, it's the liberal media, or it's the liberal elite, saying like all the elite belong to the Democratic Party, not realizing they control both parties. It's not like it's all a Democrat conspiracy. It's not a Republican conspiracy. They both run both parties. Both parties are ran by Wall Street, and people need to understand that. And I'm going to be signing off here in about a minute to all the people here at Blog Talk Radio, and I don't think this is going to get this far on the UCY radio because it's about 2 hours, 3 minutes in there, so I'm going to have to cut off part of it. But thanks everyone for tuning in to Stable Radio and UCY Radio. The recording will be on YouTube later. You can type in Voice Rebellion Radio on the on YouTube or UCY.TV or Voice Rebellion Radio. Go to UCY.TV. Go and check out the show on Voice Rebellion Radio. There's different ways to get to the show. You also can check this out on TuneIn. By the way, check out Chris Jackson Rojas' Facebook page. Subscribe to it on Facebook. And I sometimes do live podcasts there throughout the week or whatever in between radio shows. And also, this could be a pretty interesting week. The first week of May, let's see what happens. Hopefully we're not in war by the time I go on air next week at Sunday at 9 Eastern Time. I'm going to thank everyone for tuning in. And have a good afternoon / night.
No return and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad that commented, kill the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country? Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds them. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never return. And if I back down now, then forever I burn. This is the point from which I can never retreat. Cause if I turn back now, there can never be peace. This is the point from which I will die, succeed, live in the struggle. I know I'm alive when I bleed. From now on, it can never be the same as before.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.TV.